The International Monetary Fund is a specialized agency from the United Nations Bretton Woods system, established by an international treaty in 1944 to work to enhance the safety of the global economy. The fund's headquarters is located in Washington, D.C., and is run by its members who include almost all countries of the world. The bodies governing the work of the fund consist of the Council of Governors, the International Committee for Monetary and Financial Affairs, the Joint Development Committee between the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank and the Executive Council, while the General Manager and his deputies supervise the specialized offices and departments spread in different regions of the world. Although the goals of the fund and its consequences on which it is based is ideal and encouraging, at least the theory, it is clear to the observer of the reality of its work that most of the third world countries that obtained loans from the fund did not benefit from it, but the loans were a gateway to more economic collapse, financial stumbling, and even increasing rates of unemployment in those countries. The German journalist and professor of philosophy, Ernest Wolff, comments on this formulation of the goals of the fund by saying, "It rings in the ear of the listener as if the IMF is a neutral institution. Its main goal is to leave the economic world working with the largest possible system of the system and in correcting the imbalances as soon as possible." But it is the institutions created by the new superpower to impose not only their military domination, but also their economic domination of the world, and the roles of the fund in its various stages have been known as a widespread controversy over its effectiveness on the one hand and about the extent of its association with political agendas that it directs on the other hand. Given the countries of the Middle East, led by Egypt, which began to declare its economic openness since the mid-70s, the IMF has already begun to enter in the 80s and austerity programs were applied since the early 90s, which according to the Al-Ahram Center for Strategic Studies, the conditions of the state withdrawal from all fields of the economy were applied. The exchange rate float and the sale of the public sector is known as privatization, which led to the displacement of thousands of workers, in addition to reducing the number of government employees and reducing spending on the health and education sectors to replace the private sector in the country. Had these policies followed by former Egyptian President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, with the exception of the exchange rate, the largest negative impact of the solution on the Egyptians, and with the advent of the new millennium, the public sector in Egypt was merely a heritage of the past. All of this and more was the reason for the people exploding against Mubarak and dropping their rule. Almost all countries were asked by the same economic treatments, despite the decline and the difference between their economic reality, which are limited to removing customs definitions on imports and imposing sharp austerity policies. These solutions were never directed to the real problems facing the country's economy granted to the loan, and some of the fund's directions it contributed to the destruction of the local resources and industries of the borrowed countries with or unintentionally. Which supports the assumption that the fund is directed from certain major countries, in addition to the fact that the International Monetary Fund is not concerned with controlling and holding corrupt systems accountable for loan channels, such as its interest in making sure that the state is able to pay loans. What can be a ruling group that is rich at the expense of the people that bear the cost of the loan and its benefits, and the destructive criticism policies pursued by the fund under the name of economic reforms contribute to weakening the value of the local currency and the decline of the reserves of the central banks. And finally, the demand of the permanent fund for the borrowed countries to open the economy and liberalize the markets and raise the state's hand in ignoring it is clear to the privacy of the sensitive economic situation of the groups that are under the poverty line and to the weakness of the local industry in those countries, which increases the suffering of these groups and leads the local industry to the urgent collapse.